It was supposed to be the happiest morning of my life. 6 months of planning, dreaming, saving every penny for that perfect dress. The silk felt like liquid moonlight when I first tried it on, my mom said with tears in her eyes. It was everything I'd ever imagined for my wedding to Daniel. I opened my closet that morning, hands trembling with excitement, ready to slip into the dress that would make me his wife. But the hanger was empty. Just empty. The space where my dreams had hung for weeks was nothing but air and faint lavender sachets. My heart stopped, then started racing. I tore through the closet, throwing shoes and hangers everywhere. Maybe I'd moved it. Maybe it was in the spare room. Maybe. Looking for something? I spun around to find Margaret Whitmore standing in my doorway. My future mother-in-law looked perfectly composed in her cream silk blouse, sipping tea from her favorite china cup like it was just another Tuesday. Her ice blue eyes held not a trace of concern, just cold satisfaction I'd learned to recognize but never understand. "My dress," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Margaret, my wedding dress is gone." She took another delicate sip of tea, her perfectly manicured fingers steady against the porcelain. "Guess it wasn't meant to be." Those 5 words hit me like a physical blow. Not, "How terrible," or "Let me help you look." Just, "Guess it wasn't meant to be." As if my wedding dress had simply evaporated into thin air. As if the most important piece of my wedding day was some cosmic joke. "What do you mean it wasn't meant to be?" I was still in my pajamas, hair a mess, voice cracking. "Margaret, I hung it right here last night." It was right here. She shrugged, a movement so casual it felt obscene. "Emily, dear, I checked this closet when I arrived this morning. There was never a dress here. Never a dress here." The words echoed in my head like a slap. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign she was joking, that this was some twisted test. But Margaret Whitmore didn't joke. She was the kind of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and had opinions about proper napkin folding. "That's impossible," I said, my voice getting stronger. "Daniel saw it. My mom saw it. The bridesmaids. Did they?" Margaret's eyebrow arched with practiced skepticism. "Or did they simply agree with what you wanted to believe?" I felt the world tilting. This woman was gaslighting me on my wedding morning, making me question my own sanity over something I knew had been hanging in my closet. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel appeared behind his mother, already dressed in his tuxedo, looking annoyingly handsome and completely oblivious to the fact that his bride was having a mental breakdown in her pajamas. "Hey babe, Mom said you were looking for," he stopped, taking in my tear-streaked face and the chaos of my closet. "What's wrong?" "Your mother says my wedding dress was never here," I said, my voice hollow. "She says I imagined it." Daniel looked between us, confusion flickering across his features. "That's weird. But Mom, you didn't see her dress?" "Daniel, sweetheart," Margaret's voice took on that patient, long-suffering tone she used when she thought people were being particularly slow. "Your fiancé is understandably nervous. Pre-wedding jitters can make us imagine all sorts of things." I didn't imagine my wedding dress. The words came out as a shout, and I immediately felt embarrassed. Margaret's lips pursed with disapproval, and I saw Daniel flinch. Great. Now I was the hysterical bride. "Emily," Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "Maybe you moved it somewhere else? You've been so stressed lately." And there it was. The moment I realized I was completely alone. My fiancé was siding with his mother. The woman who'd told me my wedding dress never existed was getting backup from the groom. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call off the wedding. I wanted to grab Daniel by the shoulders and shake him until he remembered complimenting that dress just 3 days ago, telling me I'd look like a princess. But I didn't. Because Margaret was watching me with those cold eyes, and I suddenly understood that this was a test. Push too hard, make too much of a scene, and I'd be labeled the crazy bride who ruined her own wedding over a dress that never existed. So I swallowed my rage and nodded. You're right. I must have moved it. But as I turned away, something crunched under my foot. I looked down to find a small piece of charred lace, delicate and familiar. My heart stopped. It was from my dress, from the intricate French lace that had cost me 3 months of overtime. Burned. Destroyed. I palmed the scrap before anyone could see it, my hands shaking. Margaret hadn't just hidden my dress. She'd burned it. This morning. While I was in the shower, while Daniel was getting ready, this woman had destroyed the most important piece of my wedding day and then stood there, sipping tea, telling me it never existed. The charred lace felt hot in my palm, proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Margaret Whitmore had declared war on me on my wedding morning. The next few hours were a blur of forced smiles and borrowed desperation. My maid of honor, Sarah, found an old backup dress in my closet, a simple white sundress I'd worn to a garden party the year before. It was fine. It was white. It would have to do. You look beautiful, Sarah whispered, but I could see the pity in her eyes. We both knew this wasn't how it was supposed to be. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the cotton fabric that felt cheap and thin compared to the silk that should have been cascading around me. The dress was too casual, too simple, too forgettable. But it was all I had. At the altar, I tried to focus on Daniel's face, on the love I could see there, but I kept catching glimpses of Margaret in the front row. She was beaming. Actually, beaming. Her smile was radiant, her posture perfect, like she was the star of the show. And when the photographer asked for family photos, she somehow managed to position herself front and center in every single shot. She guided poses, suggested angles, made sure she was prominently featured. It was like she'd absorbed all the joy that should have been mine. Beautiful family, the photographer commented, and Margaret preened. I felt like a ghost at my own wedding. We'd barely landed in Maui when Daniel dropped the bomb that would change everything. I need to tell you something, he said, looking uncomfortable as we unpacked. In our hotel room. About the wedding costs. I paused, a sundress halfway to the closet. What about them? Mom helped pay for some of it. More than some of it, actually. He couldn't meet my eyes. The venue, the catering, the flowers, she covered about 60%. I stared at him, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. And you're telling me this now because she called this morning. She's upset about how you acted about the dress situation. She thinks you were ungrateful, and honestly, given how much she contributed to making our day special. He shrugged helplessly. Maybe she did have a right to have some input on how things went. A right. Margaret had a right to destroy my wedding dress because she'd paid for the flowers. Input? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you call destroying my wedding dress? We don't know that she. I found burned lace on our bedroom floor, Daniel. Burned lace. From my dress. He looked genuinely confused. That doesn't mean Mom. Who else had access to our house that morning? Who else was there when I discovered it was missing? But I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. Or maybe he didn't want to. Believe me. His mother had raised him, loved him, supported him. I was just the woman who'd been in his life for 2 years. That night, I started journaling. Not because I was trying to build a case, I wasn't that smart yet, but because I needed somewhere to put all the rage and confusion that was eating me alive. I wrote about the dress, about the gaslighting, about my husband defending the woman who'd sabotaged our wedding morning. I wrote about the burned lace hidden in my jewelry box, the only proof I had that I wasn't losing my mind. I had no idea I was creating evidence. When we got home, Margaret's campaign of control began in earnest. She had keys to our house, for emergencies, she'd said when Daniel gave them to her. And used them liberally. I'd come home to find her rearranging my kitchen cabinets because this is more efficient, dear. She'd go through our mail, offering unsolicited opinions about our finances. She'd redecorate our living room while we were at work, moving my family photos to less prominent positions and replacing them with pictures of Daniel's childhood. I'm just trying to help you settle in, she'd say when I protested. You're so new to running a household. The comment stung because it was designed to. The breaking point came when she showed up to our couples therapy session. Dr. Martinez had recommended therapy after I'd broken down crying during a dinner with Daniel's family, unable to explain why I felt so anxious and overwhelmed all the time. Margaret sat in the waiting room until our therapist called us in, then simply followed us into the office like she belonged there. I hope you don't mind, she said, settling into the chair next to Daniel. I think I can provide some valuable perspective on your marriage. Dr. Martinez looked as stunned as I felt. Mrs. Whitmore, this is a private session for Emily and Daniel. Of course, Margaret smiled. But I know my son better than anyone. And I've noticed some concerning patterns in how Emily handles stress. That's when it hit me. Margaret wasn't just interfering in our marriage. She was trying to erase me. Piece by piece, boundary by boundary, she was making me disappear from my own life. Into this kingdom of despair came a strange discovery. One day, I followed Margaret when she claimed she was going to the bank. Instead, she went to a storage unit facility across town. I parked where I could watch as she entered a unit and spent nearly an hour inside. When she left, I waited 20 minutes, then approached the facility. The unit door had a small window, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. My wedding shoes, the ones I'd planned to wear but couldn't find that morning. My veil, the one that had belonged to my grandmother. The guest book I'd spent hours creating with handwritten quotes about love. Wedding favors I'd crafted by hand. Even the silk flowers from my bouquet. She'd stolen pieces of my wedding day and stored them like trophies. But the most devastating discovery was a small wooden box tucked behind the others. Through the glass, I could see it was my childhood diary, the one I'd kept at my mom's house, the one I'd written in through high school and college. The one that contained my deepest secrets, my fears, my dreams about the kind of marriage I wanted. I remembered now. Margaret had offered to help my mother clean out my old room after the wedding, as a favor to make space for a sewing room. My mother, trying to be nice to her new in-law, had gratefully accepted. Margaret had taken my diary. She'd read my most private thoughts, my teenage insecurities, my fears about not being good enough. She'd weaponized my own words against me. I took photos of everything through the glass, my hands shaking with rage. This wasn't just interference. This was theft. This was violation on a level I'd never imagined possible. The baby pressure started a few months later. Margaret would make pointed comments about when we'd have children, not if. She'd send me articles about fertility after 30, buy baby items for when the time comes, and make comments about how some women just aren't naturally maternal. The attacks felt personal because they were. She'd read my diary, knew about my fears of not being a good mother, knew about the anxiety I'd carried since childhood about whether I'd be able to have children. When I finally told Daniel I wasn't ready for children yet, that I wanted to establish my career first, I thought it was a private conversation between husband and wife. I was wrong. A week later, Margaret called a family meeting. Sunday dinner at her house, with Daniel's entire extended family present. His aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone gathered around her mahogany dining table. "We need to discuss Emily's fertility issues," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of a medical professional. "I think she may need professional help." I sat there, mortified, as his aunts and uncles nodded sympathetically. Margaret had painted me as broken, defective, while positioning herself as the concerned mother-in-law just trying to help. "Now, Margaret," Daniel's Aunt Patricia said gently, "these things can be sensitive." "Of course they can," Margaret interrupted. "But Emily's been putting off having children for so long, and given her history." She trailed off meaningfully. "My history?" She was talking about the miscarriage I'd had the year before Daniel and I got engaged. The one I'd written about in my diary, the one that had devastated me, the one that only Daniel knew about. Or so I'd thought. "I shared something with you in confidence," I said to Daniel that night, my voice shaking with betrayal. "Something private. Something painful." "I know, Em, I'm sorry." She was just so worried about us, and I thought she might have some advice. "You told your mother about my miscarriage?" He looked genuinely remorseful. "She's been through so much, and she just wanted to help. By humiliating me in front of your entire family? By making me sound like I'm damaged goods?" But I could see it in his eyes again. He'd chosen his side, and it wasn't mine. The surveillance was the final straw. Something had felt off for weeks. I'd catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, feel like I was being watched. Even when I was alone. I'd attributed it to stress, to the anxiety that had become my constant companion. Then I found it. I was dusting the living room when I noticed something odd about the decorative bookshelf Margaret had given us as a housewarming gift. A tiny lens, no bigger than a pinhead, nestled between the carved wooden leaves. A camera in our living room, recording everything. My hand shook as I examined it more closely. It was sophisticated, professional-grade equipment. Not something you'd find at a regular electronics store. This was the kind of surveillance equipment used by private investigators or security professionals. I left it in place, my mind racing. How long had it been there? What had it captured? How many private moments between Daniel and me had been recorded? I spent the next week acting normally while I figured out what to do. I researched the camera model, traced its likely purchase location, and discovered it had been bought with a credit card registered to Margaret Whitmore. She'd been watching us, recording us, in our own home. I started looking for others. I found them in the bedroom, the kitchen, even the bathroom. 5 cameras total, all carefully hidden, all transmitting to a receiver I eventually tracked down to Margaret's house. The footage I accessed was devastating. Private moments between Daniel and me, arguments we'd had, intimate conversations about our future. She'd been building a file on our marriage, documenting every moment of stress or conflict. Like she was gathering evidence for some future trial. But the most damning recording was from the week before, when Daniel and I had fought about his mother's interference. "She's controlling our entire life," I'd said, not knowing Margaret was listening. "She's trying to replace me in our marriage." "You're being paranoid," Daniel had replied. "She's just trying to help." My career had always been important to me. I'd worked hard to build my reputation in marketing, and when a dream position opened up at a prestigious agency, I knew it was my chance to finally establish some independence from Margaret's control. The interview process was rigorous, but I nailed it. 3 rounds of interviews, a presentation to the senior partners, and finally, the call I'd been waiting for. "Emily, we'd like to offer you the position," the HR director said. "We were impressed with your portfolio and your vision for the company." I was ecstatic. This job would mean better pay, more responsibility, and most importantly, a chance to prove myself professionally. I called Daniel immediately. "That's amazing, babe," he said, and I could hear the genuine pride in his voice. "We should celebrate." But the celebration was short-lived. The next morning, I got another call from the HR director. "I'm sorry, Emily, but we've had to reconsider our offer. Some concerns have come to light about your professional reliability." My heart sank. "What kind of concerns?" "I can't go into specifics, but we received information that suggested you might not be the right fit for our company culture." "Information? From whom? About what?" I spent the next week investigating, calling contacts in the industry, trying to figure out what had happened. Finally, a friend who worked at a competing agency let slip that someone had called my would-be employers. "Anonymous tip," she said. "Something about you being emotionally unstable. Having mental health issues that might affect your work." Emotionally unstable. Mental health issues. The same language Margaret had used when she'd invaded our therapy session. I traced the call. It hadn't been anonymous at all. It had come from Margaret Whitmore's personal phone number. She'd sabotaged my career. Destroyed my professional reputation. All to keep me dependent, controllable, small. This wasn't just interference anymore. This was war. I realized I couldn't keep living in reaction mode, constantly defending myself against Margaret's attacks. If I was going to survive this, I needed to be strategic. I needed to be smarter than she was. So I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. First, I opened a private bank account she couldn't access. I'd been adding money to it slowly, building a safety net in case I needed to leave. I changed all my passwords, secured my personal information, and created new email accounts that Margaret didn't know about. Then I started documenting everything. Every boundary crossed, every manipulation, every lie. I created a timeline of her behavior, complete with dates, witnesses, and evidence. I photographed the surveillance equipment. I saved recordings of her calls to my workplace. I was building a case, though I wasn't sure yet what I plan. "Mence. I need you to set boundaries with your mother," I said, my voice steady despite the fear racing through me. "Real boundaries. Or I'm leaving." Daniel looked up from his coffee, his expression shifting from confusion to something that might have been panic. "What do you mean, leaving?" "I mean I can't live like this anymore. She's in our house constantly. She's making decisions about our life without consulting us. She destroyed my wedding dress, Daniel. She's been spying on us with hidden cameras. She sabotaged my job opportunity." Those are pretty serious accusations. They're not accusations. They're facts. I have proof. I showed him the photos of the surveillance equipment, the documentation of Margaret's interference, the evidence of her calls to my workplace. I watched his face change as he absorbed the scope of what his mother had been doing. I didn't know, he said finally. I mean, I knew she was involved, but I thought she was just trying to help. Help? I laughed bitterly. She's been systematically destroying my life, piece by piece. And you've been letting her do it. She's my mother, Emily. She raised me alone after my dad died. She's sacrificed everything for me. And now she expects you to sacrifice everything for her. Including your marriage. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across our kitchen table. When he looked up, his eyes were resigned. Don't make me choose between you and my mother, Emily. Because you won't. Like the answer. The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd shown him, after all. The proof of what Margaret had done, he was still choosing her. Then I guess we have our answer, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. He chose her. Without hesitation, without even pretending it was a difficult decision. The man I'd married chose the woman who'd destroyed my wedding dress and invaded our privacy over the wife who'd been trying to make their relationship work for over a year. That night, I finalized my exit strategy. I had enough money saved, enough evidence documented, enough professional contacts to start over. I was done being the victim in Margaret's twisted game. But before I could execute my plan, fate handed me the smoking gun I'd been waiting for. I was cleaning the house while Daniel was at work, moving the couch cushions to vacuum underneath, when Margaret's phone slipped out from between the cushions. She must have dropped it during one of her surprise visits. The screen was cracked but still functional, and miracle of miracles, it was unlocked. I almost didn't look. Almost just set it aside to give back to her later. But something made me pause, made me think about all the months of gaslighting and manipulation and outright cruelty. I opened her photos. Most were normal, family pictures, garden shots, photos of Daniel from childhood. But then I found a folder labeled Confessions. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were screenshots of our private messages. Photos of me looking upset or angry, and dozens of voice memos Margaret had recorded for herself. Personal audio diary entries where she detailed her campaign against me. The first few were relatively mild. Complaints about my cooking, criticism of my housekeeping, plans to guide me toward being a better wife. But as I scrolled deeper, they became more sinister. Emily thinks she can just waltz into our family and take my place, one entry began. She has no idea what she's dealing with. I've been planning this for months. Another, I took some items from the wedding while she was getting ready. She'll never notice they're missing, and if she does, she'll just think she misplaced them. But it was the final recording that made my blood run cold. It was dated the morning of our wedding, timestamped at 6:47 a.m. I'm about to burn Emily's wedding dress, Margaret's voice said, clear and proud. She's in the shower, Daniel's getting ready, and I have maybe 10 minutes before they come looking for it. She looked so smug when she showed it to me, like she was already part of the family. Like she belonged. I can't stand it. So I'm taking it from her closet and burning it in the fireplace. She'll never know it was me, and Daniel will never believe her if she tries to blame me. I'm teaching her a lesson about thinking she could just replace me. The backup dress she'll have to wear will be hideous, exactly what she deserves. She paused, and I could hear the sound of fabric being moved, the crackle of fire starting. There it goes, she said, and she laughed. Actually laughed. Hundreds of dollars and months of planning, up in smoke. She'll be devastated, and that's exactly what she gets for trying to take my son away from me. I saved the recording. I saved all of them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone, but I managed to transfer everything to my own device. I finally had proof. Undeniable, irrefutable evidence of what Margaret had done. Daniel was in the garage, working on his car, when I found him. I didn't say anything, just played the recording without preamble, watching his face change. From confusion to horror to something I'd never seen before, genuine shame. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Emily, I didn't know. I never thought she'd." "She burned it," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "She destroyed my wedding dress and then spent our entire wedding day watching me suffer through it. She made me think I was crazy." Daniel's hands were shaking. "I believe you. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you before. I'm sorry I chose." "Daniel?" We both turned to find Margaret standing in the garage doorway, her face pale, but her eyes sharp. She'd come looking for her phone and heard everything. "Mother," Daniel's voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. "We need to talk." Margaret's composure cracked for just a moment. I saw fear flicker across her face, followed quickly by calculation. She was already planning her next move. Her next manipulation. "I can explain," she said, stepping into the garage. "I was protecting you, Daniel. She was never right for you. I knew it from the beginning." "You destroyed her wedding dress," Daniel said, his voice flat. "You've been recording us, sabotaging her career, stealing from us." "I did what I had to do," Margaret replied, her voice gaining strength. "She was trying to take you away from me." Margaret was nothing if not a skilled manipulator. Within hours of our confrontation, she'd regrouped and launched a new strategy. She showed up at our door the next morning with tears in her eyes and a garment bag in her hands. "Emily, darling, I've come to apologize," she said, the picture of contrition. "I know what I did was wrong. I was so afraid of losing Daniel that I acted terribly. I brought you a replacement dress. I know it can't make up for what I did, but I hope it's a start." The performance was Oscar-worthy. Her voice trembled with emotion, her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she held herself with the posture of a woman genuinely devastated by her own actions. But I'd heard her voice recordings. I knew how she really felt. The dress was hideous. Polyester instead of silk, with puffy sleeves and a bow. That belonged on a 12-year-old. It was clearly from a discount store. Probably cost less than $50. But Margaret presented it like it was a priceless gift. "It's beautiful," I lied, accepting the peace offering. "Thank you." Because I was learning to play the game. And I was getting good at it. Daniel, to his credit, wasn't buying it. A $50 dress doesn't make up for destroying a $1,000 gown, Mom. And it doesn't make up for everything else you've done. "I know," Margaret said, her voice small. I'm hoping we can start over. All of us. Maybe we could even celebrate with a new ceremony? A renewal of vows?" I saw the trap immediately. Margaret was trying to insert herself back into our lives, to regain control under the guise of making amends. She wanted to plan another wedding so she could sabotage it again. "That's a lovely idea," I said sweetly. "I'd love your help, Margaret. After all, you have such excellent taste." She preened at the compliment, completely missing the steel beneath my smile. What Margaret didn't know was that I had no intention of keeping her away. From the planning. I wanted her involved. I needed her involved. Because I was going to use her own tactics against her. I'd done my research. Margaret's prized possession was a vintage 1950s Dior gown that had belonged to her grandmother. She'd shown it to me once, early in our relationship, her eyes soft with the only genuine emotion I'd ever seen from her. "This dress represents everything our family stands for," she'd said, running her fingers over the champagne silk. "Elegance, tradition, class. It's been passed down through 3 generations of Whitmore women. It was also, I'd noticed, almost exactly my size." I made an appointment with her personal tailor, Harold Chen, who'd been handling the Whitmore family's alterations for 30 years. I spun a story about wanting to surprise Margaret with a custom dress for the renewal ceremony. "I was hoping you could show me the dress," I said innocently. "Just so I can get a sense of the style and era." Harold, charmed by my thoughtfulness, brought out the Dior. It was breathtaking. What I didn't tell Harold was that the measurements I gave him weren't Margaret's. They were mine, adjusted perfectly from my original wedding dress. Fitting. The work was flawless, invisible. To anyone who didn't know the original fit, it would still look like it had been made for Margaret. But the careful alterations would make it fit me like a glove while ensuring it would be uncomfortably tight and unflattering on Margaret's slightly different frame. 2 weeks before the renewal ceremony, I set the next phase in motion. Margaret called me in a panic on a Tuesday afternoon. "Emily, the most terrible thing has happened. My grandmother's dress is missing. I can't find it anywhere." I was sitting in my office, looking at the garment bag hanging in my closet, but my voice was perfectly concerned when I answered. "Oh no, Margaret. That's awful. Where did you see it last?" We spent 2 hours going through every closet, every storage space in her house. I played the concerned daughter-in-law perfectly, suggesting places to look, offering theories. "Maybe it's at the dry cleaner?" I suggested. "I would never send that dress to a cleaner," Margaret said, her voice rising with stress. "Someone must have taken it." I could see the devastation in her eyes. That dress wasn't just clothing, it was her connection to her family history, her symbol of belonging to something greater than herself. "I'm sure it'll turn up," I said soothingly. "These things always do." The day of the renewal ceremony arrived with perfect spring weather. I felt calm. For the first time in months. Everything was in place. Every detail had been planned. Every contingency had been prepared for. Margaret thought she was attending a nice family gathering where she'd watch me make do with whatever backup plan I'd scraped together. She had no idea. She was walking into her own reckoning. I slipped into the Dior gown, feeling the silk settle against my skin like it had been made for me. Which, thanks to Harold's expert alterations, it had been. The dress fit perfectly, every seam, every curve, every detail designed to make me look like the bride I'd never gotten to be. The champagne silk caught the light beautifully, the intricate beading sparkled with every movement, and the full skirt flowed around me like liquid gold. I looked like a princess. I looked like I belonged. The first person I saw was Margaret, standing near the entrance in a beautiful but clearly secondary dress. She looked elegant but overshadowed, which was exactly what I'd intended. Until she saw me. Her face went white. Then red. Then a shade of purple I'd never seen on a human being before. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her throat, her eyes wide with shock and something that might have been fear. That's your grandmother's dress," I said pleasantly, my voice carrying just far enough for nearby guests to hear. I had it altered. I hope you don't mind. The ceremony was beautiful, but Daniel's vows were the moment everything changed. He looked out at the assembled guests, his voice clear and strong. Emily, I'm not just renewing my vows to you today. I'm apologizing to you. For not believing you when you needed me to. For choosing someone else's feelings over yours. For allowing anyone to make you feel less than the incredible woman you are. I failed you as a husband. I let my mother's manipulation blind me to your pain. But that changes now. Today, and every day after this, I choose you. Margaret's face crumpled. She'd been publicly called out, her manipulation exposed, her control shattered. She stood up abruptly and walked out without a word. After the ceremony, a wedding blogger interviewed me about the stunning vintage dress. It belonged to someone who once tried to erase me, I told her camera. Now it's part of my story instead. The story went viral within hours. Women shared their own stories of manipulation and finding strength to fight back. My story became a symbol of empowerment. A week later, I sent Margaret a framed photo from the ceremony, me in her grandmother's dress, radiant and victorious. Below it, I mounted the burned scrap of lace from my original dress. The message was engraved, you tried to ruin my day. You built my empire instead. Margaret learned that I wasn't the quiet, controllable girl she'd tried to erase. She took my dress. So I built a legacy she'll never fit into.